see the way you look at me, the cherry on top of your broken dreams. I didn't ask you for anything, but you're acting like I did. I can feel it when you walk around. You see a light, try to put it out. Do I remind you that you never found exactly what you need? Cycles repeating. You'll get mad, I get sad, and then you'll leave, and I'm grieving. What I wish we had, what I really need. I know deep down you're good. You just so misunderstood, it's deceiving. Round and around we go, cycles repeat. Now I loved you through all of it, the good, the bad, the thick and thin. Always gave you the benefit, but it's getting hard to ignore.
The average child laughs 300 times a day. The average adult, 5 times a day. Don't take yourself too seriously. I know and have known many great painters, and all of them had a sense of humor. I'm always let down by the sourpuss, you know the type, the ones with the kind of face you'd see on a can of Raid. Take on serious issues in your work, but laugh at yourself. There's nothing more deadly dull than the serious artist, because his or her subject ends up becoming, look how serious I am. When I was a kid, I decided 2 things. Woody Woodpecker wasn't funny, he was only funny for a woodpecker. And when I die, I want the Undertaker to press glow-in-the-dark stars inside my coffin. I was not a morose kid. On the contrary, I had daily conversations with a ficus bush in our backyard. But I was kind of lonely and curious about everything, and I didn't take myself too seriously. I'll bet you were a curious kid too. Artists are seekers. We remind society that not every question needs an answer and not every problem requires a solution. It's okay to say, I don't know, and let the experience wash over you. That's enough. Just because you can't measure something with a test or perform a cost-benefit analysis doesn't mean it has no value. Where does the value come from in painting? The thing or the thought? I believe that it begins with the thing, or what the painter Philip Guston referred to as matter. In his interviews with David Sylvester, which I recommend, Guston refers to the importance of matter. For us, he says, matter is the picture plane. It is the flat surface upon which we must suggest light where there is no light and space where there is no space. The only truth a painter possesses is the flat picture plane. Everything else is a lie. The moment you recognize this, everything changes. Suddenly, resistance gives way to reverie. The dreadful becomes dutiful. The outline becomes open-ended. In other words, don't get inspired to paint. Paint to get inspired. Trust your sensitivity. A good painting doesn't always begin with a good idea. Of course, there must be a concept, otherwise it's a refrigerator magnet. But touch matters. If it looks good, it is good. Being an artist requires atomic patience. In other words, put your transmission into low gear and break the handle off. Patience doesn't produce skill, it is itself a skill. That's why it's called a discipline. Paintings come to those who can paint them, which for me is a direct link to Thomas Cole's 1847 painting, Genesee Scenery, of which Barbara Novak writes, "What we are confronted with is a painting that derives its composition and design not from an idea in the mind of the artist, not from a plan to which its parts conform, but rather from the configurations of nature itself, from the volumes created by the rock formations and the spatial extensions of the landscape above the waterfall into the distance." In other words, a good painting doesn't have to begin with a good cause. When you point fingers in someone's face, it limits their experience, and they usually end up leaving the same as when they came in. There is no transfer of power. The strongest paintings are those which escape the intentions of the artist and allow the viewer to grow more powerful. I'm pretty sure we don't see an African mask or a 15th century illuminated manuscript in the precise way the artist intended. So we invent new modes of seeing based on our own experiences and emotions. My advice is don't try too hard. Let the paint be the truth. Mark Twain said it best, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. The same applies when looking at a painting. The first question you should ask when walking up to a painting isn't, what does it mean? But rather, what am I looking at? Right away, the artist is telling you something by how the thing is made. Start with the obvious, scale. How does the painting as a physical object occupying space in the room relate to your body as an object in the room? What size brushes is the artist using? Is the palette natural or unnatural, or both? Is the painter's hand evident, or is it concealed through careful blending? What Walter Benjamin called the aura of a painting comes not only from what the artist is expressing, but how he or she is expressing it. For example, Pablo Picasso's Three Women, 1908, is 6 feet tall, so that the figures inhabiting the picture plane relate to us, one to one. The painting is an object that exists apart from us, which produces a fascinating paradox for the life-sized figures portrayed. Figures simultaneously liberated from time, yet stuck in it. The women will never age or die, but neither will they inhale the brief fragrance of having lived. They are eternally in the present tense. Picasso shows us that life isn't a support system for art, but the other way around. Art shows us how to be human. We move through life broken in half, focused on either thoughts or bodily sensations. Rarely are we fully present in both. Art teaches us to be whole because it is whole. A painting is two things at the same time, a flat surface with little piles of color, and a fictive world into which we expand our awareness. A chunky clot of paint transforms into a hand, just as real as my own, because there was no gap between Picasso's intention and execution. Leonardo da Vinci wrote, "The mind of the painter must resemble a mirror, which always takes the color of the object it reflects, and is completely occupied by the images of as many objects as are in front of it." To put it more simply, first there is paint, then there isn't, then there is. That's why looking at images in a book or on a screen can never replace seeing a painting in the flesh. Paul Klee's intimate Red Balloon and Titian's massive Assumption appear interchangeable on an iPhone because they undergo the same loss of presence. In other words, their relationship relative to our sense of our own bodies is abstracted. The painting is no longer a thing, but an image of the thing, a flickering phantasm on a screen, instantly accessible and disposable. This is both a feature and a bug. Being able to zap a digital image of my newest painting to Pakistan while I'm eating a taco is great. I'm not a Luddite. I know that curators curate from reproductions, writers write from them, and collectors buy from them. But I wonder if that loss of presence has an effect on the primacy of touch. So many contemporary paintings look better on Instagram than they do in person, whereas those painted before social media make me say, I wish I'd painted that. Touch matters. Painting is unique. Play to its strengths. Unlike other mediums such as literature, photography, or theater, in which the artist modifies and edits before we experience the work, a painting bears all of the tattletale evidence of its creation, whether it be from one color peeking from behind another, drips meandering from the top of the canvas to the bottom, or the ghosts of the initial drawing showing through. A painting is the physical consequence of one person's efforts, eternally in the present tense. Nothing enormous needs to happen, because a painter's job is to make things happen where it appears that nothing is. Now, how do you make things happen on a canvas? Here's some suggestions. Paint quickly. Don't edit when you're putting down paint. Then, every 45 seconds, put down your brush, back up about 10 feet, clasp your hands behind your ass, and look. And at that point, you can analyze. Then pick up the brush, turn off the ticker tape, the commentary in your brain, and start acting. So in other words, do first and then think. When you're thinking as you're painting, you become self-conscious, and there's nothing more amateur than a self-aware painter. Work across the image. In other words, put one spot of pale pink on the upper right corner, and then swiftly, without analysis, move it to the lower left. You can change it later, but for now, work like a boxer works the entire ring, all four corners simultaneously. That's how you get a fully dimensional use of color. Remember, the emotional impact in your painting comes not from what you're painting, but from how well it's painted. If you can paint realistic water droplets on a chicken, wow, that's great. I feel like I could reach out and touch your chicken. But a chromatically harmonious single statement is what will endure, regardless of its representational or non-representational. Hold your brush awkwardly. Hold it like it's the throttle of a Harley Davidson. Pinch the tip of the brush and then twirl it as you drag it across the surface, making marks. Switch to your non-dominant hand. When you relinquish a certain amount of control, it gives your marks a sense of directness and urgency. And finally, what I call the bug zapper. Stand or sit with a fully loaded brush in front of your painting like a lizard. Wait, wait, and then zap. Put down one mark without analysis and then step back away from the canvas. I realize that not everyone has access to galleries and museums in which to see paintings in the flesh, but most people know other artists. Seek them out. Look at each other's paintings in person. Take a road trip to a nearby museum and stand in front of stuff. If you don't know any artists, then go outside and look at a tree. It's all there. A tree doesn't follow the laws of perspective, but is a complex bundle of overlapping and converging lines, which make sense from every viewpoint. Our eyes can't view a tree in a single snapshot, but in hierarchies of information. We notice one thing, then another, and another. I compose my landscape paintings with these hierarchies in mind. One thing may appear more important than another, but, like a tree, the image must work as a cohesive whole, no matter where you focus. Like a tree, a painting enacts place. It always refers back to our body. When you stand in front of a painting or a tree, you stand in the exact same spot that the painter did, as he or she applied each skin of color. For a moment, you see through someone else's eyes and stand in their shoes. Two people share one consciousness and construct a third thing. That third thing doesn't exist. It has to be made up. And that, my friends, is our job. That's how culture is manufactured, one story at a time. One of the ways that I compose my paintings is with my soda cup rule. Cups come in three sizes: large, medium, and small. The same is true in a painting. Never use two of the same things in one composition. It could be the same color, the same value, or the same sized shape. Always modulate or slightly change them. This keeps your design fresh and vital, and keeps your viewer in a state of anticipation, as if something happened or is about to happen. Like the three soda cups, give us a large amount of one thing, a medium amount of another, and just a dash of a third. I usually keep my large forms at the edges of the composition, and gradually get smaller in scale, more saturate in color, and more contrasting in value towards the focal point of the image. Check out this Ben Nicholson painting from 1920. He uses a large amount of dark, a medium amount of white, and just an accent of pale yellow. But watch what happens if I dull the yellow. The entire composition loses its spatial power. Here is a Walter Sickert Venetian painting from 1901. He gives us a large cup of green, a medium cup of gray-green, and just a little tiny cup of yellow between the two buildings. But again, watch what happens if I dull that accent. The whole thing flattens. I adore paintings of flower pots, and this one keeps me up at night. Cézanne places two clay pots on firm footing with more solidity than the two palazzos by Sickert that I just showed you. The wildness of the garlands seems to envelop us, like going into a car wash. But it's the little white amphora between the pots that anchors the whole thing. Cézanne serves up a large cup of green, a medium cup of red, and just a splash of white. If I dull the white, look at how the composition changes. Proportions matter. In this Edward Hopper from 1906, vertical and horizontal grids are countered by the elegant curves of a staircase and banister. What a luxurious palette. I wish I had a suit with these colors. Hopper uses repetition to create a rhythmic meter, almost like the ticking of a grandfather clock, lending to the painting's grown-up vibe. Again, a large cup of brown, a medium serving of red, and just a splash of white in the bulb in the center of the composition. But watch when I dull that one little white spot. The space at the bottom of the stairs becomes dull, and my eye no longer wants to go down there. Finally, William Hawkins, whom I got to meet a few times when I worked for Cavan Morris Gallery back in the mid-1980s. 1980s. Here is a beautiful example of the inseparability between color and form. Hawkins' color seems elastic, like saltwater taffy, that you could stretch and mold in your palms. The high saturation point of the reds and yellows gives the whole thing a visual propulsion that just makes my day. In his 1943 painting, Guardians of the Secret, Jackson Pollock is suggesting that psychic space is protected by symbolic or mythic mediators. This says a lot about the act of painting. To create is to encounter passage and resistance simultaneously. All art forms begin with stuff, with matter, so that it offers some sort of resistance so that we don't go straight through to the idea. Every dancer must deal with sore muscles, every poet grapples with words on a page, and filmmakers aim lights and cameras at stuff. Each limitation is inert by itself, but when organized by an artist, becomes a living, breathing thing. Art is the magnification of limitations. That's why it's so important to learn your materials, to show up every single day, regardless of the results. An artist is born, not made. You can teach technique, but the rest is original equipment, and it comes with one instruction manual. Don't lose it. Where does resistance come from? My teacher used to say, human beings don't create art because they're superior beings. They create art because they're flawed. In other words, you have to have a pebble in your shoe, or what the poet Catherine Ann Porter referred to as a commotion in the mind. I never had to find commotion. It came to look for me in the shape of a hurricane. Those spinning dealers of pain laying down sky law powerfully. I was born and raised on the coast of South Carolina, where we have 4 seasons: Christmas, azalea, summer, and hurricane. Every September, a named storm crept up the shoreline, and my father went into DEFCON 4, taping windows, buying fistfuls of fresh batteries for his transistor radio, tying our lawn chairs into a wicker mangle, and filling our John boat, still on its trailer, with pump water to weigh it down, snapping the axle like a popsicle stick one time. Here is my brother and me blithely playing Before the Storm. Here is our 14-foot McKee docked at Merle's Inlet Marina. That's my mom, Sandy, about to go fishing. The boat was named Sandy's Clam, which tells you all you need to know about my dad's sense of humor. On September 4th, 1979, Hurricane David came to Myrtle Beach. We never saw Sandy's Clam again. Have you ever sat down in a chair and heard it crack? I'm 6'2", 2.5 bucks, which firmly places me in the category of chair breaker. And I've shattered numerous chairs in people's homes, restaurants, cafes, even on the beach. 1 minute, sturdy furniture. The next, 4 legs splayed out under my butt. There's that moment when you hear a crack and then another crack, and you know that you're going down, but you don't know how bad it's going to be. It's awful. Proof that we don't know what we know. That's what a hurricane is like. A family portrait in a hot hallway in total darkness. Voices in radio static, transformers exploding in the distance, and palmettos screeching towards a lethal bottom of sand. Later, under a bright blue sky, we emerged in a state of animation and rapture, not knowing how bad the damage will be. That was the terrible part. That anxiety was my first commotion of the mind, and my reaction was a call to form. Somehow, laying down skins of paint organized my thoughts and emotions into a form that I could take ownership over. I paint because I can never see enough places. So I return to one. Giorgio Morandi wrote, "One can travel this world and see nothing. To achieve understanding, it is necessary not to see many things, but to look hard at what you do see."
Cycles repeat.